By popular demand, Debbie Reynolds Consulting is now offering executive briefings on emerging data privacy risks and how companies can avoid them. To learn more, visit the executive briefings page on my website. Thank you. The personal views expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. I have a very special guest on the show, Nabanita D. She is the founder and CEO of Privacy License AI, and I have a couple things that I have to share about Nabanita before we start. She was recognized by Fast Company, Google, and Forbes for her work in privacy and AI. Former security and natural language processing leader at Uber. Previously worked in AI at Microsoft Research. She has worked at building at the intersection of privacy, AI governance, and digital rights, and I'm super happy to have her here. She's also a four-time founder with a broad background in tech innovation and someone that I've been connected to for years on LinkedIn, and we never had a chance to chat yet until now. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. This is really wonderful, and I seeing your work. So I'm really excited to collaborate with you and share on an important topic today.
Absolutely. Well, as I said, I'm very excited to have you here for a number of reasons. We have been connected on LinkedIn. I think we've had some chats on LinkedIn over the years, but I'm really fascinated by your work with privacy license and why you thought this was, first of all, it's important work, but I want people to understand anything that you want to share about your background, but then also about this, because I saw an article. First of all, I see all the work that you do, but I found an article that was really interesting where it really described your work around privacy license about being a machine readable privacy product. But yeah, so share what you'd like to share about you, yourself, and your product.
Absolutely. So my background, like you mentioned, I worked in tech across Microsoft, Uber, and fintech for almost 10 plus years in the privacy and AI spaces, where I had an impact of saving over $5 billion in compliance costs. I just ended up seeing privacy, how it's done across all of these different companies and sectors. And that sort of led me to starting Privacy License, and we are building the world's first privacy operating system for the AI era. Our flagship product, AI Privacy License, is a machine readable, legally enforceable data governance protocol that empowers creators to set machine readable enforceable rules that on how AI companies can use their content. And on the AI company side, they are able to comply with the EU AI Act code of practice. And our other product, Privacy Website Auditor, it empowers white coded startups to ship privacy compliant apps within minutes. And we have several customers across fintech, security, wearable companies, etc.
Well, the way that you say it, I think people may not understand how big of an issue this is. Right, and how hard this is. This is an extremely hard problem, and I want to give my opinion. I want your thoughts. So, first of all, the internet was really not built for privacy, put it like that. And so, a lot of the things that we see in innovation and technology don't really take privacy in mind, but what we have now is a rapidly evolving landscape where technology is escalating in terms of how it's being built. We have consumer or human sentiment where people really care or want to know more about what their data is doing. And then we have companies that just want to do business and want to do it with the least amount of cost and friction. But what are your thoughts?
No, totally agree. Absolutely. The old internet that we saw, for example, was run by protocols like robots.txt or terms of service that we see on every website, which is the bots and the crawlers and how AI can interact with that content. Essentially, like saying that yes, you're allowed to scrape, no, you're not allowed to scrape. So it's a binary yes or no protocol. But today we see that internet is the AI bots are reading and consuming everything without giving creators and without any compensation or attribution, essentially. Like if you write an article today, or if you create a blog, create an art, create music, create any sort of creative work and you put it out on the internet, the previous internet that we saw today was Google Logs, like the Google search site, right? Where you would get business because it would link you into SEO and it would go into your page. But today, people know have stopped going on Google to search. They go on things like ChatGPT or Claude, for example, to search or gain more information. And the internet, those particular interfaces are built by scraping on billions and billions of web pages and creative works where compensation and attribution necessarily have not been given to those creators who have published those knowledge from years of experience. So that is where the problem of AI copyright becomes so important, where on one hand, creators are not getting compensation and attribution. On the other hand, AI companies do not have legal clarity on what kind of data they can train on, what kind of data they can scrape on, what kind of data essentially is allowed. And they need that legal surety. For example, the EU AI Act Code of Practice talks about that machine readable rights needs to be respected by AI companies if creators are setting them. So AI companies fall under regulatory pressure to respect these machine readable rights, and there wasn't a good way to do that, and that is sort of where our work essentially becomes so important in AI privacy license, where we are building this protocol that creators are able to set rules saying that either how exactly AI should be interacting with their content, and on the other hand, AI companies are able to read and comply essentially.
And it's very important. So when I talk to people about this, a lot of people say, well, all we need are better laws. But laws and regulations, they're not a shield. So they don't prevent things from happening, right? In technology. And you mentioned robots.txt. I've been raging about that forever because I actually used to call robots.txt the original fig leaf of the internet. Right? So that was like, "Oh, well, you can use our stuff, but, like, don't do this to our site." So it was really nothing preventing it, but we were trying to say this is the agreement that the creators had with people who are looking at their site and their information on the website. But now what we're seeing, as you say, we have technologies that aren't thinking about Roblox TXT, even though they say that they are, and we have technologies that can scrape data indiscriminately, regardless of the creator or their particular rights. But why do you think, I think this is an incredibly important work that you're doing because we really have not up to this point had a middle solution. This is a technical problem in my view, and so we didn't really have a technical solution to that. But tell me just your thoughts about the importance of using technology to solve this problem.
Absolutely. So when you think of like web pages, like a lot of companies, creators started writing on their terms of use, for example, saying that, hey, please do not scrape on my content. But imagine the scale that AI trains millions and millions of web pages. It's very almost impossible for manual review to happen. Where imagine the AI company's lawyers reviewing manually every website to say, is this allowed to train or not? That is an impossible problem to have. And every wrong crawl would lead them to like lawsuits that we are seeing in the industry today. Like, for example, Anthropic paid $2 billion to for copyright lawsuits. And then we have also seen New York Times versus OpenAI lawsuits. So we've seen these lawsuits happen because of like AI companies not having like the legal clarity on what could be trained on, what could be appropriately sourced data to train on, essentially. And doing it manually makes it extremely difficult. So through technology, you can automate that. And that is what we're trying to solve. That imagine like a set of rules that these companies or creators could set, that these AI companies in through automation fashion will be able to read those rules and put into their training, their crawling pipelines. And essentially that tells them this content is allowed. For example, maybe commercial training is allowed or non-commercial training is needed, or maybe you're not allowed to train on it, or maybe if you're training on it, you need to attribute it in a certain way, or you need to compensate this creator a certain way, or like this is the jurisdiction it is coming from, this is the kind of data there is. Like having that level of clarity is gold for these AI companies on their end. And that can only happen through technology, where we see, like, for example, likes of Taylor Swift who have money to hire lawyers to file trademarks for their likeness, essentially. But for small creators, maybe they do not have that money to go to trademark law to do all of those things. And it becomes really difficult if we just rely on law, because I think technology can really support alongside with the legal terms to ensure that creators are protected, as well as AI companies are also training on sourceable data so that they can make better models.
Excellent. Well, tell me a little bit more about the machine readable part. So, this is my thought about it. So, when, let's say, AI or some tool encounters someone's website, there may be things that they may not know about the product or about the website or about the creator to know, like, I would imagine that the tool or product will have to know, like, the jurisdiction, the laws that will be applied, what a creator would want or not want to share about their information. And so how does that information get imbued into the product? Is that something that your product adds, or is that something you work with the company to be able to determine?
So essentially, the creator sets these information, like this is, for example, maybe a creator wrote a website. They can say who is the owner, which jurisdiction it came from, what kind of data there is in that website, how should AI train on it, what kind of purpose it can be used for, and essentially like create like this detailed metadata that gets attached to the content, and you can imagine it travels with the content through the AI ecosystem. So when an AI scraper or an AI company or AI bot comes in contact with this content, this set of rules that the creator has set tells the AI company that this is how you can interact with this content, essentially. So that metadata becomes the guiding force for this AI company when they are coming in contact with the content, essentially.
Very good. I want your thoughts about, you had mentioned the OpenAI New York Times lawsuit. And so what I have been seeing, and I want your thoughts, as a result of that and other legal things around copyright and intellectual property, we're seeing a lot of the bigger publishers like New York Times and all these other magazines or newspapers, they're trying to put a lot of their content like behind paywalls so that they're not open on the internet. But I think, I'm not sure that's the best solution. Obviously, that wouldn't work for like maybe a smaller creator, but just what are your thoughts? I feel like the internet is already becoming like more fragmented as a result of some of these things. But how is it? And I want your thoughts about your product, how it can help people be more open. Because I feel like a lot of that move towards trying to either not put stuff on the internet or wall it off from the internet is trying to answer this question where you say you can have it open, but you can have products to help you manage those rules.
Right. So I believe that block all bots or allow all bots, the binary thought processes that had existed before due to previous protocols like robots.txt, essentially. It's not really helps the business of the internet where AI, where what I understand is that these businesses at the end of the day, they want to be cited by AI. They want to be cited, they want to get business from AI. And on the AI side, AI companies want legally sourceable data to train on. So either putting it behind, like blocking it out, or making the internet closed is not the solution. So solutions like AI privacy license, essentially what it does is it keeps the internet open, but creates a set of rules that the bots can. So instead of thinking of it as it will block the bots, which it can, that is what the creator chooses. The creator can also say something like, I am allowing you to train on my content, but please give me attribution in XYZ way. Or I'm allowing you to train on my thing, but please compensate me in a certain way. Or I'm allowing to train on this, but please train my content only for educational purposes and not for commercial use. So these kind of granular rules that today AI can read and understand becomes possible because of the technology shift that we are seeing in the market, that AI is able to read and understand complex legal terms and make sense of it. And so a protocol that can sort of attach with the content and create these clear set of guidelines, you can think of it this way, would really empower the internet. Like my big vision is that every site, just like how they have a privacy policy, they will have an AI privacy license. The goal behind that is just to tell how AI should be interacting with that site or with that content, so that essentially both the internet can stay open, as well as creators get compensated, and as well as AI companies are being able to compliant with these AI governance regulations like the EU AI Act, which is coming out essentially.
And tell me a little bit about the EU AI Act and its importance in your view, and how it plays into not just your product, but just the way people are viewing artificial intelligence. And in my view, I'm very interested. The thing that stood out to me about the EU AI Act was their focus on harm, where I feel a lot of times we don't think about that, or that's not talked about as much. So where we talk about innovation for the sake of innovation and speed for the sake of speed, but really bringing it down to that human element, I thought was really interesting. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so. The area of the EU AI Act that is relevant to my work is the EU AI Act Code of Practice Copyright 1.3, which is the copyright chapters rules, which says that every creator, when they set a machine readable right, the AI companies should respect those machine readable rights, and based on that should train according to their content or not, essentially. So, and machine readable protocols that would be identified would be respected by the EU AI Act body. So it makes sense that the EU AI Act is supporting creators today, because creators are not getting compensated, they are not getting attribution, and they do not have a good way to sort of set rules on how AI should be using their content, essentially. And so the UAI Act taking a stand for these creators through this copyright chapters rules, to me, it is well aligned with the incentives of the internet as well. The way I see it is that in the future, if creators no longer continue to be compensated, they do not have incentives to create anything. And then AI would be training on AI slop, and then AI models would continue to deteriorate maybe, or not become as like, they might not get the right data that is needed to, as we are closer and closer to AGI essentially. So at the end of the day, these AI companies, what really differentiates them is the quality of data that they are training on. And previously they got that good quality data because AI did not exist on this level and creators were really creating the stuff. But if creators stop creating because they're not getting compensated, then AI company models would become less stronger or more full of AI slop. So the thought process there is that it incentivizes the entire ecosystem to adopt a solution that the EU AI Act is like pointing towards, is like a machine readable rules that creators are able to set, AI companies able to read and comply, and both parties win together. I feel like that is accelerating towards long-term innovation. Like, yeah, in the short term, maybe creating and adhering to these rules can slightly slow down the processes, but in the long term, it can reduce these lawsuits that's happening. Essentially, everyone has a path to move forward together in a partnership model between creators and AI companies, and overall, the internet wins together. So for me, I think from a long-term innovation point of view, the incentives are incentivized across the ecosystem, essentially.
I definitely see the incentive for someone who wants to protect their information, and then also forward thinking organizations that see this as the best or a very good way to solve the problem that was very expensive to solve. Like you say, like either in a, reactive in a lawsuit, or maybe proactively where they had to spend a lot of more human time and being able to do this. But do you see that? And I agree with you, the incentive about having good data, because if people don't trust systems, they don't put their data in systems, or they don't put quality data into systems. And so I think that does impact the AI companies or the companies that are doing this. But are you seeing a strong incentive for companies to adopt this so that they are better at reading the signals that are being created from creators about how they want their data to be, shared or used in AI systems?
I mean, the major companies have signed the EU AI Act Code of Practice, like Google, Amazon, Anthropic, Cohere, and multiple other companies. Like I think around 20 major AI tech companies have signed the code of practice saying that they would respect these machine readable rules that are selected by the EU AI Act Code of Practice. So I believe that there are I believe that the leadership in these companies are also recognizing the need for shared rules, or how the business of the internet is transforming slowly from the old SEO to GEO today, or essentially how they would be working with creators, or they would be working with regulatory bodies like the EU AI Act to respect that. So I think there is a strong cohesion between regulatory pressure, economic incentives for these AI companies, especially for in regards to access to high quality data to adopt something like this. And in general, wanting to build better models is where I think those were some of the common themes that led them to sign something like this to adopt it. So yeah, that is where my thought process would lie essentially. Yeah.
Now, in terms of machine readable rights that are in the European Union, we don't yet have those types of rights here yet. But I think we also have things that are emerging, like the global privacy control, which is not the same thing, but the idea is somewhat similar, meaning that a person or an entity can communicate their preferences about different things. And I can see that extending to maybe machine readable rights as it relates to what we're talking about, like AI and copyright and things like that. But what are your thoughts?
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you that it can extend, especially because US is seeing so many copyright lawsuits that are happening against these AI companies. Essentially, I think there will be laws and rules, and we have predominantly followed the EU essentially as before there was GDPR, and that led to so many different privacy regulations that are happening across multiple states of the US. So I believe with these machine readable rights or the copyright predominancy that is set by EU, we might see similar themes occurring in the US as well in the upcoming years, essentially.
I think so. I know from when General Data Protection Regulation came out and the CCPA in California, we saw some companies say, well, even though those rights pertain to the EU or pertain to people in California, for some companies, they said for certain things, they would extend those things to like other people in the US. So I'm wondering if this idea around machine readable rights or machine readable privacy products if companies are maybe using them successfully in these other jurisdictions, do you feel as though there may be an incentive for them to expand that to maybe different states in the US that may not even have regulation right now around that?
Yeah, I mean, we used, for example, the Grammys, they are essentially advocating for something like this, essentially like to protect the singers like this, and essentially a lot of different bodies that I've seen in the US, they are advocating for something like this. Like even Hollywood SAG-AFTRA, they are also advocating for something like this. So a lot of the different, like in the creator industry, this is a huge issue. Essentially, I think it's like everybody is pro AI, but they want to get compensated or attributed, or they want to protect their intellectual property. And obviously, it's not possible to follow your trademark on where it is getting ingested within AI in traditional ways. So there needs to be regulations and there needs to be things in place for it to happen. So I can definitely see how, like in different states, the US, especially, like I think this problem goes into so many different spaces. Like for example, deep fakes is a direct sister space of this. Essentially, that so many deep fakes are happening because there again isn't clear attribution or clear compensation. So actors, for example, are getting deep fakes because their likeness, their voice, that is being stolen and leveraged into deep fakes. So this problem in general, like, goes into so many different spaces, and I can see how essentially so many different organizations are currently advocating for regulations or rules that could happen on a statewide or a countrywide level in the US that could change that. And yeah, like Grammys, definitely I've seen them very actively advocating with No Train Act and Fakes Act. These are the two acts they're trying to pass on a bipartisan level. So definitely, like, lot of different organizations are advocating currently. Yeah.
What's happening in privacy or data right now that's concerning you the most?
I think another space that I really think that we see a lot of new tech coming is like vibe coding. Like everyone is vibe coding right now, but there's no vibe code privacy, right? In the sense, like, how do you ensure that when you're vibe coding, you're following the privacy regulations appropriately? Whatever you're creating in your vibe coding way, it follows, complies with the different privacy regulations. That is entirely missing. So that is a huge space. That is another space that we are innovating in. Like one of our products, AI privacy or privacy website auditor. It essentially ensures that when people are vibe coding and creating websites, they are in compliance with these privacy regulations by finding privacy issues on the website that they might be creating that they might not know about. So I think this is space we'll see a lot of innovation in, that like every day millions of websites, millions of apps are being generated and created by everybody. Just like how vibe coding is affecting security, we are seeing all of these different security related incidents. We'll also see a huge number of privacy related incidents come up of these apps that are being created without thinking of privacy by design, without thinking about privacy compliance. So that is another space that I think we'll see a lot in the next few months, essentially.
One of the things that I think that comes up a lot, and I want your thoughts, and this is in websites and apps. So let's say a developer has created a website for a restaurant, right? And it has different marketing and things on that website. But then now they want to use that work that they use for the restaurant website for a hospital website. And we know that because medical health, especially in a patient provider situation, is protected in a different way, some of the things that were okay for you to do maybe on a restaurant website aren't okay in a hospital website. And we're seeing this play out a lot in the mobile app space and also in the website space where companies are getting into trouble because, like, for example, someone fills out a form on a hospital website or a medical website, that data has to be treated differently than if someone was making an order at a restaurant. But what are your thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. I think like purpose limitation is a huge area within privacy where you have to absolutely use the data that you have collected for the purpose that it is collected for, and not for anything beyond. Like data minimization, purpose limitation go hand in hand. And different sorts of data, different regulations apply. Like you mentioned, for medical, like HIPAA would apply. For restaurant, different regulations would apply essentially. And I think it comes down to, like I mentioned, a lot of the people are vibe coding today. They do not have privacy knowledge. They do not have privacy lawyers, essentially. I think I saw in a study recently that for every 500 developer, there's one privacy lawyer. So it's not possible for that one privacy lawyer to essentially ensure that every developer is shipping code or building websites or building apps that are privacy compliant. And that is where we'll see a lot of innovation, I think so, in the next few months, where essentially privacy is also something that could be factored in essentially when people are coding and building and creating new technologies and new apps and new websites essentially. Yeah.
There was a story in the news about a company gotten very popular, very famous recently for all their work that they were doing in AI, I think in the employment space, if I'm not mistaken. But then at the same time, they had this huge data breach that they're dealing with right now, where some of the data that they have collected about people, I guess it was like information like maybe their people's social security number, whatever information people were using to apply for jobs, things like that. And so they got into trouble with a data breach. And so to me, to me, that story is an example of the imbalance there, where they're really doing well or doubling down on their use of artificial intelligence, which is nothing wrong with that. But then there's this gap on the privacy part. And for them, I think it lowered their price, I believe, for their company. It's creating some regulatory challenges for them. But I think what we're saying is that there are ways that you can approach data in a way that creates more safety for your company, but then also the consumers. But what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think security is a huge concern in the vibe coding era where, for example, if you have sensitive information, you have to ensure that it's encrypted at rest and at motion and like data minimization and you are collecting it for the purpose. There are like all of these privacy by design principles that apply. And I think not factoring privacy by design while or not doing the right PIAs and DPIAs before building those products that we are seeing essentially. I think that leads to all of these like wrong architectural choices that leads to data breaches. So I think it's all interconnected. Like privacy and security is so interconnected in like different ways that I definitely see there's a need for the right security measures as well as privacy measures, especially when building apps or creating. And I have heard of like I think you're talking about Markor, like
Yes.
I've heard about their essentially the data breach that went through, and it's not just them. There are so many other companies as well that I'm hearing data breaches by recently. So definitely, I think it's important to think about these privacy. The privacy compliance exists so essentially to protect, safeguard, and ensure that sensitive data is collected, stored, shared, and cared for appropriately. And when these compliance, like and privacy by design, is not taken seriously, we see all of these different issues that definitely happen. Yeah.
I think to me, the message is, it's very expensive to have a breach and it's very expensive to have to go through that process. But if you can avoid that or minimize that, at the beginning, like you're talking about privacy by design and thinking about it on the onset, I think helps companies be able to move fast because these types of things do slow companies down. But I want your thoughts about we're talking about vibe coding and we didn't yet talk about AI agents, but the thing that concerns me about data in companies is that a lot of the privacy issues that come up have to do with context in which the data is managed or handled or accessed. And so some of the things that concern me about, let's say, for instance, two different departments were handling data and they're handling certain data about people, but not everything. And so maybe in isolation, a particular data point about someone would not be harmful. But now, let's say the organization, they're taking data from different parts of the company, they're combining the data together, and then now this data is more risky because it's more identifiable, personally identifiable to the person. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's where your least privilege comes into play, where essentially who has access to the data and for what purpose. Essentially, in reviewing that on a frequent basis is important. And then tagging the data appropriately with the right data classification tags is also important so that what purpose and what kind of sensitivity it is used for. If a department is thinking of merging data, then those tags needs to be updated. The right access needs to be updated. Like least privilege again would prevail here as well to ensure that who has access to it is the people who really need access to it, and it's also reviewed on a daily basis, and there's a time to live assigned to it. So there's so many technicalities that needs to go into place to ensure that the data is protected and the data is used for the purpose that it has been used for. And if the purpose is like if the data is being merged and the purpose is changing, then getting consent again from the users is also required, because we have seen so many regulatory issues happen for companies where they took the data for a certain purpose and then did not ask the user for consent for a different purpose, and so then the regulators fined them. So essentially asking users again for consent for the new area of data that will be used for will also become important. So there are so many spaces that needs to align, and again it comes down to having the right privacy knowledge and teams doing as processes change or as any app is changing, doing PIAs, privacy impact assessments or DPIAs appropriately can alleviate some of these issues, and also doing privacy design reviews before making these design decisions can also really help.
Mm. I want your thoughts about metadata. I did a video about this that's coming out soon, but I think metadata is going to be very important in the future because like things with deep fakes, like we're seeing like some in the camera industry, we're seeing some digital cameras make their cameras in a way that if you take a picture certain metadata about the creation of that photograph is kept in the photograph, but it can't be changed. That's a new thing I'm seeing. But I think metadata fields and the information about the data would have to expand in order to enable the things like you're doing with like machine readable privacy. But I think, the purpose, like the more information about the data, I think, would need to be imbued in the data to make it more machine readable. But what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what we are doing at AI Privacy License. We are embedding metadata into the content essentially. And it is very granular metadata. So it has information, for example, like is it AI generated? What kind of purpose, like can it be used for? What kind of data it is? What kind of data classification there is? Data category there is? Then what kind of data can it trained for? Is it commercial use allowed? Is educational? Is it for commercial or educational? Can it be trained on AI content or not? So there are all of this granular metadata that can really help in terms of defining the content, like it could be image. For example, in cameras, there could be things like you mentioned, the origin of that can really help Even we are seeing watermarking, the technologies like watermarking, if something is generated by AI, can be useful, especially in deep fakes. So this is a evolving space, I believe, where we would continue to see that this watermarking technologies happen not only in images, but also I think certain AI generating devices are also watermarking text that is generated by AI essentially. So like embedding those metadata to help ensure that people know that this was an AI generated text versus it's written by humans. So we're definitely seeing a lot of these things, these innovations happen, and really important in different contexts of issues that we are seeing, be it deepfakes, be it copyright, be it, yeah, different spaces for sure.
Yeah. Well, this is so fascinating. I think you're definitely way ahead of everyone else on thinking through this issue is really cool. But if it were the world according to you, Nabanita, and we did everything you said, what would be your wish for privacy anywhere in the world, whether that be regulation, technology, or human behavior?
I think privacy at the end of the day is a human right. Like it's defined as a human right, and I think every person should be able to determine how they like should be able to use the internet, use AI, like use like leverage the innovation, but at the same time they should be able to protect their content. They should be able to protect the intellectual property. They should be able to protect their data. They should have transparency in terms of how their data is being collected, used, shared by companies. And I think a world where everything is done appropriately, like privacy is becomes like really the brand differentiator. It's like embedded in every company's mission that privacy should be at most like number one important, especially when it comes to user data, it comes to users. I think people would have clear understanding on how their data would be used. Like today, for example, all of the models are black box models. In a world where privacy is done perfectly, there will be clear understanding on what kind of data was ingested within these models, for example, or how a company, for example, is using my data, or how is privacy being protected. I think privacy policies are a starting point, but we are seeing a lot more innovation happen in that space. So definitely looking forward to a world where privacy is, like I mentioned, embedded in the mission statement of every company, essentially.
I love that. I love that. I love that wish. I think that's a great one. But then also it's something that's possible. So I would love to see that innovation. But thank you so much, Navanita, for being on the show. I really appreciate it and I support your work. Tell us how people can see your product, get involved with your work.
Absolutely. So you can find us at privacylicense.ai, which is our official website. And if you're intrigued about the AI privacy license initiative that we are doing, you can follow us at aiprivacylicense.com and you can generate a license there. Generating a license is free. And if you're an AI company who is listening to this podcast, we have released open source libraries that you can embed in your training, crawling pipelines, essentially to read these machine readable rights, and we are able to do that as well, completely open source as well. So the innovation is there, completely open source end to end. Please try it out, give us feedback, reach out to me on LinkedIn and tell me how you're using these technologies, and let's work together and create a world where creators get compensated as well as AI companies get legal clarity, essentially.
Excellent. Well, thank you again so much for being on the show. Again, I am a great fan and follower of your work, and it's a pleasure for me to be able to share your work with the audience.
Thank you so much again. I really appreciate you having me on the show, and thank you for your kind words as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, we'll talk soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.